that when a dancer gets injured, they don't just lose the ability to perform, they lose the version of themselves that existed through that movement. And that's a profound loss that deserves to be treated like a profound loss.
There are a lot of times when you should refer a student out, and that doesn't mean that you're not a good dance teacher or not a good mentor. It means you're not a therapist. And that's the most loving thing that we can actually do. Welcome back to Beyond the Steps, produced by Apollo Performance and Turning Point Dance Creations. Today, it's just the two of us singing out of hours because we're not singers, we're dancers. But this is honestly one of our favorite episodes to record every month because we just wrapped up our May series with Damion Harmon, Not Your Average Therapist, and we have a lot to say.
We really do, but when don't we? I really enjoyed this conversation. I think this is something that it has affected me many times throughout my dance career, and I didn't necessarily identify it as this, but it would have been helpful to have this conversation back then. So hopefully it helps you guys out there too. Over the past 3 weeks, Damien took us through what grief actually is, how it shows up in competitive and team transitions and the world around us, and then how the grief hits differently when it's your own body and becomes the loss, right? And I'll be honest, every single conversation left me thinking about something a little bit differently.
Same. If you missed any of the conversation with Damien, any of them, any of the three, go back and start from the beginning because they build on each other and they're absolutely worth your time. But today, Bree and I are breaking down the moments that landed hardest with us, and we're taking it back to our own spaces. So let's get into it, Bree.
Yeah. So one of the things that shifted the most for me in week one, episode one, was Damien broadening the definition of grief. We walk into our studios every day surrounded by grief we do not recognize, right? The kid who lost a teammate, the dancer processing something that they saw in the news, the coach who watched a student he or she mentored for 8 years walk out the door and go somewhere else. We, on the surface, call it their attitude. What's their problem? Like, where's their head at today? They need to get their head in the game or identify it as distraction. But oftentimes it is grief.
Yeah, and we just don't recognize that. And the thing that struck me was he said, if you notice a child acting differently than they normally would, so from one end of the spectrum to the other, you know, you can look at that and go, that's a red flag. Something internally has changed because something externally has so drastically changed. And instead of asking what's wrong with that kid, start asking what has this kid lost. That shift in framing completely could change how we respond and how effective we are with our students.
Yeah, and Damien also made the point that grief is not linear. It doesn't fit in a timeline. And in the athletic world, especially when we're talking about athletics and their brains haven't fully developed and they're dealing with things in their own way, we are so addicted to timelines, right? When is dress rehearsal? When is competition? When is the convention? When is the next competition, right? Like we have to be ready, 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 that we often rush grieving students through something that needs more room than we're giving. And just to expand on that, like I think my connection there was that as a teacher or director, whatever your role is as the adult in that situation, sometimes you're going to have to adjust. Like if we just need to tackle it, right? Like we can't ignore it, we can't expect them to push it down. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is leave space to acknowledge it, and I'll show up in it as honest of a way as we can. And that might make your lesson plan a little bit different for that day, but it's so important. It's just as important to allow time for the grief portion as it is for your rehearsal class portion.
And I have one teacher that is so good about that. Like I'll walk in her classroom and the kids will be sitting in a circle and they'll be sharing thoughts. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like I need to be so much better about going, okay, she must have recognized something in some kid or some group of kids that was about this, that needed this. So I'm definitely going to take that away. And one of the big things, the takeaways from this segment overall is that grief is everywhere in our studios. When he broke down all the different types of grief, like it can show up. It's not just, oh, there's an injury or oh, they lost the competition. Like it can be relationship, it can be actual death and loss, it can be injury. It can be anything. So we just have to learn to see it. Segment two. Oh my gosh, this one was a good one because we talked about kind of like all the forms of grief that are not your normal. Someone died or someone had an injury. It's like what's going on in the world. Where are your teammates? What are they doing? Are they still there? And it really hit me in a place that I was not expecting because we talked about team transition grief, and I was able to recall a very hard moment for me. And we talked about athletes leaving teams, and we almost always centered the athlete, but Damion was so good about the grief that the coach feels and the teammates feel and the studio community because of that loss. And we just have never really had the language to talk about that.
Right? And I felt that. I have watched a kid who's poured their heart into a program walk out the door to go to another studio. Actually, many times I've seen that happen. Um, and it's left me feeling very heartbroken, betrayed, um, completely devastated. And then following that, feeling guilty for feeling those feelings, right? Like it wasn't mine to feel. But Damien was able to give us a language for that. And I think so many studio directors and owners and educators and any coach of a youth sports organization, those are common feelings. So it is a real loss. And hopefully that makes people feel a little better about it.
The other thing that got me was the competition grief piece because that was, I say it all the time. Oh, we didn't get it, but next time. Like you're automatically rushing these students and parents to the next time after a disappointing loss in competition or the loss of a game. And we look at it when they fall apart because, oh my gosh, do they definitely fall apart? They definitely fall apart. But we kind of look at it as weakness, like, oh, they need to suck it up. But that's grief because you have to think they thought they poured everything into it and had earned that win or that medal or that rating. And it's so important to recognize that space between the loss and next time is a grief space, and it's not our job to immediately pivot to get them out of it. We got to let them feel it first.
For me, I think the segment takeaway in general here for the second episode was we minimize grief when it does not look like what we expect it to look like. Our job collectively is to make room for the losses that don't have funerals, right? Like it's not to trivialize any loss in any regard. And I think that we could all do a better job at recognizing and handling that with care. So, moving on to our third episode, week 3 is the one I'm still sitting with. So Damien said something I want to say out loud, that when a dancer gets injured, they don't just lose the ability to perform, they lose the version of themselves that existed through that movement. And that's a profound loss that deserves to be treated like a profound loss. One of the things that I had asked him towards the end of that episode was, you know, you see oftentimes you'll see kids just completely disappear when they get injured, like they're no longer a part of that team, and no longer a part of that thing, and then they come back and everything just feels disjointed, and it just doesn't feel cohesive anymore. They feel awkward, they're not feeling like the same person, they feel like they've kind of missed the span of time with the team. So I had asked Damian, like, when you're injured, is it better to like kind of take some time off and stay at home? Or do you still show up to practices and games or performances and participate in the ways that you can and support in the ways that you can? And his answer was essentially, it's up to the athlete. And it could be a combination of things. And I think that we all need to, parents included, need to really sit in that.
Yeah, and that as an educator really reframes how you end up, talking to a student who is had an injury like that. It's like, not, oh, let's get you rehab, let's get you back on the floor and let's get you going to where we need to get you to go. It's about, okay, so who are you now? Like, have you changed? What were you thinking? What are you thinking now? What's going on with you? Like, it changes the person. um and we have to really really address that.
So the bounce back pressure conversation was a gut check for me. I know I have said things like, you'll be back before you know it, to a student or an athlete. trying to be encouraging. And Damien really helped us see that how that can actually short circuit the grief that needs to happen before you say that. Before we focus on the comeback, we have to let them process kind of the loss in their own time, in their own way.
And that can be hard because you mentioned it in the 3rd episode. We have timelines. When is recital? When is dress rehearsal? When's the next competition? And we have these timelines and we automatically assume that they're just gonna fit into those timelines. And that's not necessarily true. So we have to take a step back and realize that our timelines might actually not be the timelines that we can actually run with when we have a student that
In fact, if I'm thinking back and being honest, most of the time they are not in follow they do not follow any timeline that is convenient whatsoever.
that is how Murphy's Law works. Like, it's actually gonna be at the worst possible time when you have such a tight timeline that it cannot move, but it has to move, in the
And
best interest
doing
of
the
the student.
dumbest thing ever, like how when he said, sometimes it just happens when you like you're running in the backyard and step in like a hole in the grass and like you break your ankle. Like that is so true. I know at least for dancers, like 9 times out of 10, I'd be like, what did you do? They come in with the cat. What did you do? I was running on the playground and stepped in a hole and now I or tripped and fell and just,
And here I am, and I'm like, "Really?"
really, of all the things that we do, this is how you are getting injured? Okay, great, awesome.
Although I did have one dancer come in one time and say, "I was standing on a desk." Okay, why? Because desks are not for standing. But yes, so, your timeline, you really have to adjust that sometime. And the piece that really hit for me was about, like, those very traumatic injuries where you're gone for a long time and not sure that you're ever really gonna come back from that, or you may not ever come back from that. And you had a story about one of your son's teammates that, now has this very clear hesitation and fear, and he named that, like, now there's a fear around the thing that you used to love to do. Like, that grief is real and it's long and it can change people forever. And it has the very same weight as a major quote unquote traditional loss, like a death or an illness. So we really have to honor that.
Absolutely. And it also hit me. This was a connection moment for me, which I love when we have the connect the dots moment. But I started thinking about like you have a senior, right? Like he's a graduating senior this year. Like football is not going to look the same for you guys anymore. Like you've dedicated your whole, you've supported this child, you've taken him to all the practices and the games. Like your Friday nights become cheering him on at the game. Like, and then all of a sudden they graduate. And for so many parents, it's just done. And the connection you had with the families and the teammates and the full schedule, like that all goes away and you're left in this kind of like weird silence and there's just nothing to fill that space anymore. And so many parents talk about that, but that's grief. So when we see kids kind of hit that final point in their career, whenever that is, whether it's after high school, after college, professionally, whatever, it hits the family in a way that maybe we don't recognize as much as we should. So for me, that the takeaway from this final segment with Damien was injury grief is identity grief, right? And recovery is not just physical. There's a lot of mental gymnastics involved with that as well.
So I want to get real because we used to do the homework, and I wanted to give us some homework. Let's get real and really talk about what we're gonna do, because this series changed how I'm gonna walk into my studio and I'm gonna slow down. And my first reaction is not gonna be what's wrong with you when a student is off. I'm gonna ask myself, what have they lost? Before I redirect, before I correct, before I push, I have to look at that change in behavior or that change in that student and go, man, there could actually be a loss here that I'm not seeing.
For me, I would say, I mean, I love that. For me, it's about the language. We say you'll be fine. It's going to be okay. Shake it off. Let's refocus. Like let's get at it. Right? Some of those phrases shut down grief before it has a chance to even breathe, right? Before you even have a chance to recognize the effect that it's having on you. So I want to practice instead saying that was really hard. and it makes sense that you feel this way, right? Like, how do we recognize that more in the moment?
I think both of us are walking away with from the series with a deeper respect for the clinical work that people like Damien do, because we are often, as you mentioned in one of the previous episodes, tasked with doing that clinical work as a therapist, and we do not have the licensure nor the professional experience to actually do it. And with him being able to give us so much detailed information, it's very clear that there are a lot of times when you should refer a student out. And that doesn't mean that you're not a good dance teacher or not a good mentor. It means you're not a therapist. And that's the most loving thing that we can actually do.
There's a lot we can do in our spaces to acknowledge grief, but when it gets to a certain extent, it's always better left to a professional. Like, there's a clear, like, delineation of when, like, I can't help with this as much as you need me to, and we need to get you the help that you need, right? So the takeaway from this segment was simply, learning is really just the beginning. The real work and is in what we do and how we set up our spaces, and that's something that we're continuously talking about and exploring on the show. So for all of you out there, I hope this was helpful for you guys.
So, we're big on education and community here because when you know better, you do better. So, tell us what was your biggest takeaway from this series with Damon? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one and we want to keep this conversation going. This has really been one of the most meaningful months that we have recorded. I mean, and I really, really mean that. Damion Harmon brought clinical depth and realness and so much compassion to each conversation, and we are genuinely better for it.
If you haven't listened to all 3 episodes with Damien, go back and start from the beginning. Each one builds on the last, and they're absolutely worth your time. Go check out Damien's work. His Instagram handle is not your average _ therapist. The website is the Couch Co LLC. He has tons of resources there for you to explore. And finally, he has a book. It is complete with workbook pages that you can go and do step by step and exploring whatever grief or loss you are dealing with. Again, that book is A Loss is a Loss, and it's available to purchase on Amazon. Go check that out. It's fantastic and really great if you have, a team or something that you're in charge of, something that you can work through together if you're all dealing with a certain type of grief together.
And make sure you're following the show because next month we're going to have a brand new series coming your way with more conversations that are going to go deeper than just choreography. Until then, we hope you continue